Today, we're welcoming nutritionist and autoimmune disease expert today, Risa Goux, and I'm super happy about this and excited about this. Um, I've been thinking a lot about it, and I'm just happy to have you on the show.
Well, thank you, Anthony. It's great to be here.
Definitely. So I'm curious myself, like, what's your story and how you got here in the first place of overcoming your own journey, and within that, like, what sparked you to want to help other people do the same?
Yeah, so my story is, started when I was growing up in my home, and I had a lot of food confusion because my mom was always on a diet. She was always trying to lose that 5 to 10 pounds, and I was very confused because some foods, she would call bad, and some foods she would call good, and I always thought the bad foods tasted really good. So I was very confused. I had a lot of diet issues. My grandmother was doing the same thing, and nobody was really majorly overweight, but it was just always this restriction and the starvation. So I had a really, really bad relationship with food. And of course, in high school, I was perpetually on a diet trying to lose, 2 or 3 pounds. And so I did not have a good relationship with food. I don't think most women did in those days growing up. And so I ended up getting married, and we conceived our first child immediately. I mean, we basically looked at each other, bam, no problems, no issues. We got pregnant, and I had a great pregnancy, and my daughter was born. And then a couple of years later, we tried to conceive our second, and it wasn't going to happen. Like, it just was. We had every obstacle, and I could not conceive. I had a few miscarriages, so I ended up I acquiesced, and I went to a fertility specialist. And basically, we sat down after all the testing, and he handed over a slip of paper with a prescription on it for synthetic thyroid medication. And I said, well, what's this for? And he said, it's for your thyroid. And I said, well, what's with my thyroid? And he said, well, it's basically an underachiever. And I said, okay, so how long do I take this for? And he said, every day. And I said, for how long? And he goes, oh, for the rest of your life. And it was that day that I walked out of that office that I had two major burning questions. One is, why is my thyroid an underachiever, right? Why am I not actually producing the thyroid hormone that I was born to produce? And the second question I had was, why isn't he asking why? Why am I taking a synthetic to mimic a hormone that my body basically should be producing? Why is he not like up in arms about this? So eventually I did all my own research, and I went through a list of why I couldn't be conceiving. And I found out that I had this very common gene mutation that most people have called MTHFR. Think of what you would say to somebody who cuts you off on the freeway. And all I needed was a B vitamin that was in methylcobalamin form. So I was like, oh, that's easy, right? So I took the B vitamin. Next thing you know, I got pregnant. Naturally, had an easy pregnancy. Everything was great. And then several years after my son was born, I went to a naturopathic doctor, and they tested me and told me that I had Hashimoto's, which means it's an autoimmune disease that now I'm having antibodies that are attacking my thyroid, right? You know a little bit about this. And so I'm like, okay, this is crazy. All the wheels are coming off the bus. Now, I probably was Hashimoto's back when they tested me originally, but they never really tested me for those antibodies. So I probably was positive at that time. But I found out I'm positive for this Hashimoto's. And I'm like, hold the phone. What's going on? Why is my body doing this? And they really didn't help me. They just basically, give you a pill, and they basically give you a squirt gun. And I knew that I had a raging fire in the basement because I had this autoimmunity, right? So my Th17 was activated. I was in this cytokine storm. I had a lot of inflammation. Everybody does when they have autoimmune disease. And so I got to get the fire hose out. So I started to go down and do all this research. This very long time ago, to find out what my root causes were that would cause me to be attacking my own thyroid. And I could not find anything anywhere on this. So I started to create my own list. I put it in my book, Food Frame, because it's really important to know all the root causes of autoimmune disease. And a third of it is genetics. That's a big factor. And another huge portion is leaky gut, which most people have. I see that in my office all day, every day. And then there's other factors like viruses or bacterias or low vitamin D or MTHFR, that gene mutation. It could be a heavy toxic load, so heavy metals, and hormonal changes definitely will do it. So for women, it's usually pregnancy or menopause. And so I created that list, and of course I had every single issue on that list. And then I was able to reverse my Hashimoto's. I had it quite elevated, and it took me several years to do it, but I did do it like you,
Wow,
and I was able to reverse my Hashimoto's.
awesome. Like to hear
Yeah.
that.
in that process, I was going back to school. I was in a completely different field before I had my kids. And then I went back to school. I was always fascinated by nutrition. And I became a clinical nutritionist. And then I found functional medicine, and I was trained in functional medicine. So now I am a functional nutritionist. I have a private practice. And I'm always focusing on systemic inflammation, which is the driver of disease, and gut health, which is pretty much the other component that either optimizes or hinders our health. And in functional medicine or functional nutrition, we're based on 4 pillars, all of which I work with in my office. We're looking for prevention. We're looking at root causes. We consider the body one interconnective unit, so everything has to do with each other. And lastly, we look at data. Conventional medicine does a bit of too much guessing for me because they're predicated on whatever the insurance companies are dictating. And in functional, I test. I want to see all 4 markers of your blood sugar. I want to see all 9 markers of your thyroid. I want to see your inflammatory markers, which they don't usually test for, and so on and so on. So I do a pretty comprehensive blood screen with everybody.
Awesome. Yeah, it's an excellent story. I mean, 2 things that stuck out to me is what you said, our relationship with food. I thought that was pretty important because we do have a relationship with food. Like a lot of us, I mean, it starts with our own bodies, like relationship with ourselves. And like most of us have unconscious relationship with it, especially in America, with the standard American diet, and then just kind of not understanding where we're coming from. So I think it's good to model that. And then another thing that stuck out to me was basically like you have to be on this for life, right? Most of us, we don't want to hear that, like because I feel like it's kind of like losing autonomy in a sense. And first of all, it's not true. Like you don't have to do this because it's just one way of being. But if you can like open up to a lot of things that you teach and things like that, we can completely heal in a lot of cases, right?
Yeah, I really believe that people were not born with a deficiency in medication. And, I just don't think that's the case, right? You were not born with a cholesterol medication deficiency, right? That you need this medication in order to thrive. Most people I know that are on multiple medications are sick.
Hmm.
It's supposed to make us healthy, but it really doesn't. Now, I'm not
Hmm.
saying that it's never a time and place to take medication. It depends, but so many things, as you referred to, can be reversed by just eating, right? Our genetics load the gun, and our lifestyle and our environment pull the trigger. So genetics, which is a very big advancement that we're having now, I do a lot of genetic testing because we all have genetics, right? You might have a genetic to a gene that tells you you're going to have high cholesterol, right? That happens. It's very familial. It's handed down. And so, for you, 250 on your total cholesterol is not a bad number. So it always depends. We look at each individual differently. But allopathic medicine, really, the paradigm that we have is a pill for an ill. So you have a problem, they're going to give you a pill for that. I work with so many people with autoimmune diseases, but I work with a lot of people. I mean, here's a great example. I get a call one day from Freddie Couples, one of the greatest golfers of our time, a PGA golfer. And he calls and he says, he's referred to me and he says, I want to lose 20 pounds before the Masters. And I'm like, no problem. Weight loss is a side effect of wellness. Weight loss is not an issue, right? We're going to take care of that. But he comes into my office, we sit down and I said, Freddie, I know that you're famous for back pain. Right. So tell me about that. He's swinging a golf club. He's like, oh, I've been swinging a golf club my whole life. But I find out, I'm going to ask him what does he do? He travels with his physical therapist. He's had no surgeries. He has doctors in different countries. I mean, he spends an exorbitant amount of time working on his back pain.
Hmm.
So both of his homes are on golf courses that are treated with chemicals, and he works on golf courses that are treated with chemicals. So he's breathing these chemicals day in and day out. So at the end of it, I said, any surgeries? He goes, no, I haven't had a surgery. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So I said, how much, has anybody tested you for inflammation? And he said, no. So I said, I'm ordering some tests. He said, order whatever you need to. So sure enough, I put him on my detox. His pain level was a 7 or an 8 out of 10 every single day. And the first week on my detox, when I cleaned out his liver, he had some smell sensitivities and headaches as well. I'm not speaking out of school because he tells the story on my website. But the first week he came in after my detox and I said, what's your number? He said 4. Anytime I ever saw him after that, he was at a 0 or 1, depending on how much he swung that golf club.
Nice.
But what I did was his inflammation numbers were extraordinarily high, like crazy off the charts high. So we really helped to decrease the systemic inflammation. Now, this is a case of somebody who was not in autoimmune state, right? But he had this fire in the basement, right? We have a fire in the basement. We have major systemic inflammation. Our body is going to hold on to stuff, right? We're going to collect iron. We're going to collect our resource. We're not going to lose weight. We're going to have a lot of issues because we're in a state of danger. When you go to the doctor, they typically give you a little squirt gun. So I'm going to give you fire hose, right? And that's what I do. And that's what I did for him. And he got out of pain. And of course, he lost 20 pounds and he had a great round at the Masters, one of his best.
Awesome. I love to hear that. I mean, it's definitely a cool story. Like something that comes to mind for me is like if we're diagnosed with like high cholesterol, like you said, like it's not that we have a statin deficiency, right? They may have their place in some instances, but it's like what are the lifestyle causes and how can we move these things around and take action on that to kind of give the body what it needs, because when we get out of the way, the body knows what to do in all cases, I feel. Even if we can't heal 100%, we can always make improvement, I think.
For sure. And cholesterol goes up for 4 reasons. 1 is blood sugar dysregulation. 2 is thyroid dysregulation. 3 is liver congestion or gallbladder congestion. Now, again, genetics do play a part in that, but those are 4 major reasons why you would see elevated cholesterols. Now, we know, we're out of the 80s, we know that cholesterol is not the devil. It is a fatty lipid. It's a really helpful for brain, but we cannot conjugate our hormones without it, or vitamin D. We need cholesterol. We were not actually born with the devil in our system. So when it goes high, then we have to pay attention to why it's gone high. Where's the elevation coming from, and look at the root cause of that. So we do know that cardiovascular disease is caused by systemic inflammation and plaque buildup, but it really isn't cholesterol. I had somebody come and see me a few years ago who just got out of the hospital with a second heart attack, has been on statins for 25 years. His cholesterol was at 139, which is unconscionably low, but his inflammation markers were through the roof, like crazy, crazy high. So I test everybody for the CRP, which is the C-reactive protein test. That tells us what your risk factor is for cardiovascular disease. Homocysteine is another major factor. So I'm always looking at inflammatory markers that are going to lead to cardiovascular disease. Cholesterol really doesn't matter that much. We want the fluffy, light kind rather than the dense, sticky kind. I don't really go down that road too much unless somebody really needs to, because it's a waste of time and resources. We're really focusing on inflammation.
Awesome. So transitioning a little bit, I know you focus on a lot of the thyroid. So there's a lot of people who have this in some way, shape, or form. Hashimoto's is probably most common. And I think it's kind of cool that we both reversed it ourselves, both had it and both reversed it. So first of all, like real quick, like what is the thyroid and what are its main responsibilities in the body?
So the thyroid is a gland that sits right in the center of our neck. It's a butterfly shape, and basically it's in charge of our temperature gauge and our metabolism. But it really intersects with almost every system in the body, so it's critically important to make sure it is optimal, right? There are things that affect the thyroid, right? It starts, it's a complicated process. It's kind of like if you go to the science museum and you drop that ball down, it rings the bell, goes to the tunnel, does all these things, then it miraculously lands in the cup. It has a lot of those things in order to get into the cup, right? To create your active thyroid hormone. So it starts in the pituitary, which is the size and shape of a pea in the brain. And that's what creates TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. TSH goes through the liver. That's why we detox. And we create T4, our inactive thyroid hormone. It's inactive. We do not use it. It's 93% of the equation. We have to cleave off one atom of iodine and we convert that to T3. That conversion process is critical. The allopathic conventional medicine just assumes that everybody converts, but that is not the case. Look at labs all day long. We do not all convert. Occasionally I'll find a really good converter and I get so excited, but most people don't convert well, right? We have to cleave off that atom of iodine and create that active thyroid hormone. That's only 7% of the equation. Most labs from conventional doctors will only test you for TSH, because the theory is that if we can't get the ball in the cup, we're going to just toss more balls down that track because we have a higher odd of getting something stimulated and getting a ball in that cup. Mm-hmm. So That is not also the case as well. So TSH, and it's very, very wide range. So they're going to wait till you're already out of lab range, which you'll be really sick by then. So basically, we want to make sure, oh, so they don't even test. They test for TSH. We may get a T4, maybe, but they don't test for anything else. And we're always looking at hormones. I'm always looking at free and total. Free means it's unbound. That's what's usable to us. And total is the sum of what's bound, usually to proteins, and what's free. So it's really helpful for guidance. In addition to just you're looking at your hormones, your free and your T3 and your T4, is there something that could be reversing it, like stress or inflammation? We could be pulling from our T3 sources, right? So I'm always ordering a reverse T3, and I'm always ordering a T3 uptake, which tells us if our hormones, our sex hormones, are competing for that thyroid site. So if men have a lot of estrogen, maybe they're aromatizing too much testosterone, they've got high blood sugars, they aromatize into estrogen, that can affect your thyroid. If they have too much or too little testosterone, that's going to affect your thyroid. Same thing for women. Women on the pill, birth control pill, usually it gets affected by the thyroid. In addition to any menopause, that's going to really affect the thyroid as well. And lastly, I'm looking at both antibodies, the thyroid peroxidase antibody and the thyroglobulin antibody, to see if we're in the state of attack with the thyroid at that point. It's unfortunate, but I work with so many people, and so many people I see antibodies to their thyroid. I have to tell them the great news that they've got Hashimoto's, and it was probably never tested for years and years and years and years, or ever, ever, ever. So it could have been easier to reverse at a lower level, but now they're in full stage fire in the basement. Yeah. So I am, so that's what I do with thyroid. But thyroid's really helpful. If you have a low T3, that's your free T3. That's the star of the show. We usually see easy weight gain, very difficult to lose. Fatigue. People are just exhausted with a low T3. We see constipation, anxiety, depression, hair thinning, nails brittle, outside of the eyebrows go, cold extremities, and we see a lot of irregular periods. So you might not have all of those, but most people have many of those. So that's what we're looking for in a thyroid.
If people are seeing a conventional physician, which is most people, what can we do to actually like get those tests? Do we have to go somewhere else? Can we ask? What do you think?
Yeah, so you probably want to go to a functional or integrative doctor and bring a list of all of those 9 markers to see. Now, a lot of them will not order them. I ask a lot. I try and help people save money, but they just don't do it. So it's very hard. I don't like to guess. I just think it's not as effective. I'll let the guessing, I'll leave that to conventional medicine. But there are some labs you can maybe go direct now, but there's a course on my website called Achieving Optimal Thyroid Health that I put everything I know about thyroid into that course. And it's really for anybody with any thyroid issues. So hypo, hyper, autoimmune Hashis or Graves, anybody who had a thyroidectomy, they had their thyroid removed. And I really talk about each marker so that people know how to read their own labs. They know what to ask for. And I break down what supplements to take, what not to take, what foods to eat, what foods not to eat. So it's really, really helpful for that. But you just have to ask your doctor for these tests. And if they won't do it, then keep asking or come to me and I'll do it.
Yeah.
But you need to know,
Exactly. Even the functional doctors, they don't test for that?
Functional as well, for sure.
Okay, gotcha. They do. All right, yeah. So definitely focus on functional medicine, and for the audience, like someone who's actually versed in these tests so they can actually help you for your goals. Because your physician does not have the same goals as you. Like, it's okay. Give yourself permission to change. It's like they most likely mean well. It just, not everyone is educated in the same way. You just got to be aware of that. That's all.
Right, exactly. You want to find the right fit so you both have the same goal. And it really isn't the doctor's fault. So I don't want to speak so pejoratively of doctors, because they're taught by, in medical school, they don't really get any nutrition classes at all. So they don't even think that's a factor in health. And they're very incentivized by insurance companies and pharmaceuticals. So when a pharmaceutical, and I work with a lot of doctors as patients, and I know that pharmaceutical companies bring in lunch for them every day. So right. It's,
Yeah, I've done a show on that in the past. It's kind of interesting.
Right. It's crazy. Yeah. You know, I have another story for you that I think is probably relevant for you, because this was a guy that I worked with. I worked with his wife and his two kids, and they were all just really struggling. And I finally get a call from the wife saying, my husband wants to come see you. And she was on the floor. She couldn't believe it. She was like fainting, couldn't believe it. He's a surgeon. And, you know, he's very medical, and he did come to see me, and I put him on my program. We did all the testing. I said, do you want me to review the test with you, or do you want to look? He had, every doctor I've ever asked, they always say, you review it with me. And they, you know, and I ask, you know, how much do you know and stuff like that. And he's, you know, big surgeon. Anyway, at the end of my 12-session program with him, the last day, he said to me, and he was mid-50s, and he fully changed his diet, and he was like optimal weight. I mean, he was a rock star. But the last session I had with him, he said, I have to tell you something. And I said, sure, what is it? And he said, I didn't mention this to you when I first came in, but I had been wearing a hearing aid for the last 2 years. And, you know, this week he had gone, the week of our appointment, he had gone to the audiologist in the hospital he works in. And the audiologist said, I don't know what you're doing, but you do not need a hearing aid anymore. And I asked him, what do you think that is? I had my feeling of what it was. And we both came to the same conclusion, that it was the systemic inflammation that was driving his hearing loss.
Very interesting.
Like, how cool is that? I love that. Right?
Definitely. I mean, there's so many different causes of things. And just when we kind of alluded to this earlier, but like the more we focus on health and just overall healing, like we can just focus on healing things, but other things will get better without us even knowing, in a sense. It's like kind of everything is connected, right?
Correct. Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. So in terms of the thyroid, what are some things you see in your patients, and some really big things that affect the thyroid in a negative way, such as environmental factors and things we may be doing? What are your thoughts on that?
So the thyroid is a fragile gland, and it is affected by chemicals. It's affected by stress. As I said, it's affected by, you know, sex hormones. And it needs a really good protein, fat, and fiber is what I tell everybody: protein, fat, and fiber. Conversion, we need, for a proper and optimal conversion, we need certain nutrients like selenium. Selenium is a big one, right? Iodine is very controversial, but I think iodine is very helpful when there's no autoimmunity. So iodine we get from fish, we get from seaweed, those kinds of things. And selenium, we find those in Brazil nuts. So those big fat ones everybody leaves in the jar. So I recommend 2 of those a day, no more than 2. More is not better, but 2, it gives you enough selenium to make that conversion more likely to happen. And just real whole foods. Chemicals, you know, we eat just a tremendous amount of chemicals in our culture. To date, the FDA has approved, I don't even actually think this is a up-to-date number, but the last time I checked, it was 86,000 chemicals were approved for us. 86,000. I mean, think about that. That is way more than any other planet.
And most of these aren't even tested.
Yeah, most of them aren't even tested. Exactly. And it doesn't matter who's in the White House. We are approved about 2,000 to 6,000 a year. It's unconscionable. It's in our toothpaste. It's in our supplements, for heaven's sakes. It's in our food. It's in our air. It's in our candles, in our cleaning equipment. It's in our sheets. It's everywhere. We have to be very diligent about toxins. It's crazy. We just moved into a new house. We bought a bunch of new furniture, and I could not find a couch without chemicals. I just couldn't do it. So I searched. I was having one made, and I'm like, I got to get a natural fiber. So it's extraordinary. I mean, you can smell it when you walk into the house. I always have the windows open because it's just all these chemicals in our clothes and everything. So chemicals are really hazardous to our health, period, but it's very hard on the thyroid as well.
Yeah, I mean, all these things like stack up, and we live in an environment where the conditions are stacked against us. And as more we can add, like, and more we can take on to kind of reverse these things, like buying environmental friendly furniture, for example, right? The better off we're going to be, because we just have a lot of stress, and we can more can reduce that, the easier it is can heal our bodies.
Exactly. You know, I use this analogy that I think is really helpful for people. But, you know, I say to everybody I work with, imagine that your body is a sneaker factory. You've got all the equipment to make a sneaker. So I know if I give you leather or rubber or canvas, we're going to get a sneaker at the end, right? Think of what the Nike factory might look like, right? And if I said to you, let's put some cell phone parts in your sneaker factory, what would you say? Right? If we went to the Nike factory and they've got millions of dollars worth of equipment, and I'm like, let's put some cell phone parts, see what happens, right? They would be like, are you crazy? They'd call the police, send them to the loony bin, because what would happen if we put cell phone parts in sneaker factory equipment? It would break, right? We'd have to put the cell phone parts in cell phone factory equipment. And so I use that silly little example because it's whoever it was who created us, whenever that was, we had some things crawling on the ground and spreading through the earth that we could eat. Sustain ourselves and procreate are two main goals as living organisms. And years later, the Industrial Revolution came, right? World War II really kicked things up with chemicals. We started creating tons and tons of chemicals. So those chemicals are basically cell phone parts in our sneaker factory. And so when you think of it that way, right, and think of it that you're pulling up to a gated community, there's always the lane for the residents, right? Those people go right through, but the visitors have to wait, get a pass, get checked, whatever it is, and they're waiting, right? So it's the same thing. Foods that we're born to eat are going to go right through the system, no problem. Not going to put stress on the liver, the kidneys, anything like that. But the chemicals, they got to wait at the gate because the liver has to convert them to an enzyme so that they can get processed through the system. So how long is your line? How much stress are you putting on your liver? How much can the guard handle converting into enzymes that they can get through the system?
Yeah, I like that.
Right? It's a better visual for you to understand. These are foreign invaders. They are not welcome, but we do it all the time. The amount of colors in our food that we use red dye number 40, and we just passed in California. We can't serve those in schools anymore in a couple of years, but it's insane. Europe doesn't have those. I was in the market a few weeks ago and I had to run and grab something, and I ran down just randomly. I was like at the checkout line, I'm running, and I ran down the cookie aisle. I could not believe how many Oreos I saw. Different sizes, different shapes, different colors, different flavors. I was like, really? Do we really need 20 different Oreos? I mean, this is insane. I was in Italy last summer and I went into the grocery store and their chip aisle was like, one little thing, not an entire aisle down an enormous warehouse. I mean, how many chips do we need? They're frozen food. It was like 5 doors, ours is aisle upon aisle of frozen foods. I mean, what are we doing? Right. We're trying to save time. We're spending all the time in a hospital and on the pharmacy line.
Exactly.
Right?
I mean,
insane.
To get specific on the chemicals, like two that come up for me is chlorine and fluoride. Do you want to talk about those real quick?
Yeah. So, fluoride was marketed in the 50s, and they said that, if you take fluoride, then you won't have any cavities, right? It's good for health. There was really no science that proved that, but it caught on, just like a lot of things did, right? In the 80s, we talked about how fat makes you fat.
Yeah.
Obviously, is not the case. We've never been fatter, and we don't eat as much fat. Sugar is the devil, but I talk about this in my book too. But there were studies, and the sugar industry was paying things so that that fat was the culprit and not sugar. And so fluoride is very much in that same camp, and so it was adopted. And there are still plenty of dentists out there who think that fluoride is good, but it really isn't. These things gum up our system, and they cause havoc. Again, they're in the visitor line. They're going to cause a lot of effort and energy in the body to convert them and to break them down and to not store them. But there's only so much you can do. If I came to your office every day, Anthony, and I gave you a stack of papers on your desk and I said, I need this by, tomorrow morning. And the next day I did the same thing, and the next day, and every day I do the same thing, not just 5 days a week, but 7 days a week. Eventually you're going to go, I can't do this. You're going to slow down, and then you're going to quit. And that's what happens to our liver. It becomes sluggish. We can't keep up with the pace of work that we're doing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of research showing that fluoride is neurotoxic, and it's not something we're meant to consume. Like, there are two types of fluoride. You got the sodium fluoride, which is actually first developed as a thyroid suppressing medication, right?
That's right.
It was never really used because they found something else, but Then you got the calcium fluoride, which is more natural. It's certain foods and certain waters, but they're two different things. But unfortunately, the sodium fluoride, and there's a whole. I talked about this before. It's like, I mean, they say it's like to like it used to be like it's kind of like industrial waste products, so they kind of put in everything. But I don't know about that, you know. But anyway,
Yeah.
so those are
It's,
some things.
if it's not in your cupboard, I was just telling, I went to the salad bar at Whole Foods about a year ago, and I was looking at the ingredients on the chicken that I was about to put on my salad, and it said propellant. Like, propellant. I asked the manager, what's the propellant in the chicken? Like, I don't put propellant on my chicken when I cook it at home. And they really couldn't answer me. So they didn't have an answer of why there was propellant in the chicken. So when my kids were young, I would go to the market with them and I'd say, here's the rule. If you want to buy something and you have to look at the list of ingredients, and if we have those things in the home, in our house, then we can buy it. But if we don't, it's a chemical, we're not buying it. And so that's, I think, a big rule of thumb is just, to close that up, is that, if it's not real, if you don't have it in your kitchen, you probably shouldn't be eating it.
Definitely. So that's definitely some things to avoid, like the chemicals and all that. So what would you say like are some really critical things that we have in terms of our lifestyle to have a healthy thyroid and to make sure everything is functioning properly? Like what are some things that we should be doing every day and just to really stay on point with our thyroid?
With the thyroid?
Yeah.
Is, gluten and dairy, corn, and soy are not the best. It's not going to help your thyroid thrive. Now, I'm not saying everybody should not eat gluten. I would do testing to see if you're gluten intolerant. If you have autoimmune disease to your thyroid, absolutely, I would tell you do not eat gluten. Gluten is very effective at continuing to perpetuate leaky gut. It's just, we don't make it as good as we used to. And it's just very damaging to our gut. So it's not something I would recommend for anybody with antibodies of any kind. But if you have thyroid antibodies, definitely no gluten. Dairy is also sort of hit or miss. 2/3 of the population is dairy intolerant. We cannot process that lactose, that protein, and sugar in dairy. Casein is the protein and lactose is the sugar. So we have a hard time. Now, if you're one of those people, if you're in the third that you could do dairy, I would say sheep milk or goat milk, so sheep cheese or goat cheese, is a little bit better. It has a different casein, different protein that's more easily digestible. But I would really say minimize or avoid dairy altogether. If you have autoimmunity, I would say absolutely take it out. Soy and the thyroid really don't get along. So soy is not supportive of thyroid health, and it just sort of chips away at it. So any soy sauce, soybeans, soybean oil, and processed foods, any soy products. I'm not a big fan of tofu. I know some people are. I'm not. Everybody's individual. And soy products, I'm just not. 93% of our supply in our country is GMO. So it's just not something I like as a health food, period. And I use things like coconut aminos, which is a really good soy sauce substitute. And then corn also is so overgrown in our country. And corn, we really don't glean any nutrition from it. It's a lot of omega-6s, but we really don't glean any nutrition from it. And so it's just a basic carbohydrate. We love corn. Of course, who doesn't love corn? Corn chips, corn, everything, right? But I would say if you want to optimize your thyroid, I would stay away from corn.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I feel like those things you mentioned are kind of common to avoid for all autoimmune disease, especially because in America we have like the same 12 foods packaged up differently, like corn, wheat, chicken. It's like all the same food, but they kind of make it look different, but it's not. And then
Exactly.
especially in America, because like I know I keep talking about that, but it's like everything is kind of GMO, pesticides, and these are like the big commodity crops that we focus on. And the more we can get away from that, it's not like, I mean, there's ways to like eat soy properly, like traditionally ferment it. But usually as a condiment, like now we have like it's kind of ridiculous amount and it's GMO and all that. So we gotta switch that up. And like you said, focus on real food and the more variety we can get. I think the better off we can do. Of course, always listen to our bodies, and I think that's good advice. So
Yeah, and add those other nutrients I was talking about with the selenium and the iodine.
definitely. All right, so we talked a lot about the thyroid, and I know people bring a lot of value out of that part. So I know something you talk about a lot as well is something that some individuals struggle with, and that's menopause, right? We There's a lot of from my understanding, there's a disconnect with the proper transition. Like a lot of people struggle with this, and it shouldn't struggle as much as they should. Does that sound right?
You know, it's really hard. I mean, yes, you can, there are things, we have tools now that can decrease the suffering. For women, it's really tricky. You know, we go through our periods and puberty, then we have birth babies, and then we've got to deal with menopause. And menopause basically just means that your ovaries stop producing hormones. Our
Mhm.
adrenal glands kind of take over from there, but we really don't produce that much. You know, for guys are straight, they just produce testosterone and then they go into andropause at some point and they decrease their testosterone production. But women are different every day, every year, every, you know, for a lifetime basically. And when we go into menopause, we basically all of our hormones go in the tank. So we feel crappy. We are tired. We can't sleep. We have swelling, bloating, weight gain. I mean, brain fog, bone fragility. So we really do need hormones. Now, there's different philosophies on hormones. We now have such a wide array of natural bioidentical hormones, which I always recommend. There's a lot of science here that tells us that, you know, estrogen is critically important for the brain, right?
Mhm.
Progesterone is critically important for longevity and for the health of the uterus. So there's tons of proven studies that will show us that the proper, and I'm not talking about synthetic, but I'm talking about bioidentical hormones are really beneficial for women. No, everybody feels differently. We only have a 10-year window. So if you don't get on hormones right away, or in that 10 years, I should say, then you really miss the boat. You cannot do it. And there's philosophies that you can stay on some of these hormones for a lifetime, and some people feel like you can't. So I always say, do what works for you, and you know your body better than anybody else does, even a very good doctor. So listen to your body.
Definitely. So with all that, I mean, I would imagine that our lifestyle plays a big role in how we transition, like is in terms of the symptoms that we experience, and like because like the healthier we live, like I feel like everything kind of acts as a buffer, right? It's almost like this armor that helps us kind of navigate through difficult situations in terms of our health, like our lifestyle. Um, like what role does that play in terms of how we transition and how we experience it?
Well, that's a great question. You know, stress is a huge factor in our health. I know we hear that, but it really has an impact, right? It has an impact on our blood sugars. It has an impact on our thyroid. We talked about that. It has an impact in your sex hormones, right? That's your endocrine system. Those three departments are your endocrine system. So stress will play a part in dysregulating our hormones. You know, sugar is a big factor in dysregulating our hormones, but a lot of girls or women are put on the birth control pills at a young age. I mean, I'll hear it really, really young. I said, well, why'd you go on it at 13 or 14? Oh, I had bad acne. Well, it is not an acne medication. If you're having bad acne because your hormones are off, then fix your hormones, right? We're just so used to doing what the doctor says that we don't even question that. So dysregulating hormones can happen for a myriad of reasons, right? An impact on too much toxins. It could be too much stress. It could be, blood sugar issues are going to affect it. So they could be, a bacterial infection or a virus. That it could be thyroid dysregulation. So it's this vicious cycle of, you can't fix one thing. You kind of have to fix everything. So everything works in harmony. And if you're out of balance, you just got to balance the whole body. So yes, it has an impact in menopause for sure. I also think genetics play a part in that as well. So, but it depends what your lifestyle is for sure. If you're go,
Yeah.
go, go, stress, 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 and you're eating crappy food, you're probably going to have a worse experience. If you're having major menstrual cramps while you're menstruating years, you're out of balance, most likely, or there's some deficiency of some kind. If you don't fix that, what do you think? Well, you think menopause is going to be better? and then it depends how much, what your pregnancies were like and how many pregnancies you had, because you're shifting your hormones then. So a lot of factors have to do with menopause and hormones just in general.
Definitely. What would you say are some key practices that would help our transition, um, make it more graceful? Like, are there any things that come up for you that are like are really helpful in your practice, or that you see in the research that kind of make things easier?
For sure, diet.
Okay.
Diet, when you are in a place of homeostasis with your body from food, you're having less fluctuations. So if you're giving it a major sugar impact and you're grabbing that Starbucks frappuccino on the way to work or school or whatever, and you're having 65 grams of sugar before you even started your day, that's going to spike your blood sugar levels. It's going to respond in your hormones. I mean, it's going to send inflammation all over the body, but you're going to have a hormone response to that. So if you're starting your day with a collagen shake filled with fiber, protein, fat, and fiber, then you're going to have less fluctuations. So lifestyle and food are a huge impact. So what you eat, I mean, eat real food. And like you said this earlier, the whole body responds to that, right? It's going to take care of the whole cycle of the body and because it interacts, it all is connected. So eating good food is free, basically, right? We're going to eat anyway, so we might as well eat the good stuff. So I
Right.
focus on protein, fat, and fiber because that's what we need. We don't really need too many carbohydrates unless you're an elite athlete. And you are having carbohydrates, you're having complex carbohydrates with vegetables. How much do you need? It kind of varies per person. But if you're eating well, then you're going to have less of an impact in menopause. So, I mean, I've experienced that myself. So some people who have just been on the pill for years and years and years, or they've had, bad diets, or they've dieted a lot, or, they've just had a lot of impact on the body, it's just going to be tougher.
I imagine. Um, Something that's came up is, so if people are like working with a doctor, like a conventional doctor, do they help them with things like this, or is it just kind of like the same approach to thyroid? Just here's the medication, or do they kind of would they inform them on that, or is that something we should look towards more functional medicine again?
Yeah, I would say that, I don't have personally a lot of experience with that because I don't really go to conventional medicine doctors really ever. But I do think that they give, I mean, at least what I hear from my patients, they offer up a synthetic hormone. So, they can do something synthetic that mimics a hormone. And some of them will offer bioidentical if they're a little bit more integrated minded. But yes, I think that they do offer that. But I think menopause is something that is very under highlighted. It has been for years. I think it's just starting to come out that women are really suffering, and we don't have to suffer. There's just, I
Exactly.
mean, the fatigue. I don't know a woman over 50 who sleeps through the night. I just don't. They all wake up. It's either the hot flashes and weight gain, and they're just running on empty all the time. They're exhausted, and then they go to bed, they fall asleep fine, and then they're up, and they can be up for hours. So if you don't walk into that transition balanced, then it's going to just accentuate that, right? So you want to
Yeah, that
always
makes
be
sense.
balancing, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time, money, and effort because you have to get your labs done, and it's a balancing act. Guys don't have that balancing act because you guys are pretty much the same every day.
Yeah.
Women are just constantly fluctuating, so it's not easy, and it really there's so many women who suffer.
Yeah. I mean, it does make a lot of sense. Like if people are struggling with that, because it's an extended period of time as well. Like it's not just like a month. It's years that they can go on. So I feel like it's really important to get that under control because it's our life, and ultimately, like the power's in our hands. And if we want to live the best lives we can, we got to optimize things and understand like there's a conventional way of doing things. Like we said multiple times, like the environment's not necessarily set up for health. Like the conditions are stacked against us. And the more we can become aware of our own state of health and just empowerment within ourselves and heal from whatever, because like I said before, everything's connected. So if we're dealing with some type of condition going into that, it's going to make it that much more hard in a way. Is that right?
For sure. It's much more challenging. Yeah. And we do have to be aware. We just have to decrease our toxic load, and we have to listen to our body. Our body speaks to us. We just haven't learned to listen to it. But when we are, have headaches, there's some inflammation most likely or some deficiency that's causing those headaches, right? Something's off, right? When we have constipation, we have fatigue, when we can't sleep through the night. I mean, all these things are signs that something is not working, right? Anxiety and depression, we're not born with a deficiency in these medications. There's something that's causing that, right? So get to the root cause of that. So I think it's educating people, and I think podcasts like yours are really essential for people to learn to listen to their body while it communicates, and to know that there's options, that it's just not a pill for an ill paradigm. That is just so old fashioned. It's just, it doesn't work, you know. But if that worked, then people who are on 8 medications would be healthier than people on 6 medications, right? It's just, you know, I always say there's a hole in the boat. So what do? We go to the doctor and they patch up that hole, but 2 more holes just popped up in the back of the boat, because we're now blocking absorption of magnesium or vitamin B or whatever it is, right? And or it causes, you know, joint pain, or it causes, you know, muscle deterioration. And then we run to the back of the boat and we're plugging up those 2 ones, but we just got 4 more on the top of the boat. And we're just running back and forth trying to plug these holes with medication. And it just, and I'm not saying the medication is never needed for anyone ever, but we have to be very selective. If you have blood pressure issues, fix the root cause that is causing blood pressure issues. Same with cholesterol, same with thyroid, same with everything, right? If you need it temporarily to get you going, you know, but while you figure it out what's going on, okay, great. You know, every case is different, but it is not an accumulation of medication. I can tell you that I don't know anybody who walks in my office with tons of medications and feels good.
Definitely. Like when we have symptoms of whatever it is, like it's not like our body's trying to hurt us. It's giving us signs that something is wrong. Something needs to be done differently, because whatever it is that is causing this, like, because again, disease is a condition, and conditions can be changed, right? So like if we're experiencing some type of disease or whatever, like understand that it's possible to get well, and just make progress towards that direction, and just keep going, you know.
Exactly.
All right, so talked a lot about menopause, and understanding that it's not necessarily, doesn't have to be like this fearful thing that we have to overcome in a way. Like the more graceful we can be within our health, like the easier it is. And I think that's enlightening news, because we're not necessarily a victim to these years. We can be empowered. So I think that's good there. So in terms of autoimmune disease, um, just a little bit of a transition. So like I see this very commonly. Um, like, well, you know the stats, like how many people like have these, like, 'cause I know there's such a variety of diseases in that.
Yeah, so the most current stat I have is 50 million Americans suffer or have been diagnosed with autoimmune disease. It's growing. I don't know if it's because we're testing more or because it's becoming more prevalent, because their leaky gut there's just too many things attacking our gut, so it's becoming a little bit more mainstream. But the statistic is the average person goes to 6 doctors before that they are finally diagnosed with autoimmune disease. So we're very undereducated as far as autoimmune disease is concerned. There is no autoimmune disease doctor. We have different doctors for different appendages, different glands, organs, and things like that. So we don't, and all of them are not educated on autoimmune disease. So we don't have an autoimmune disease doctor. And there's so much research out there, and there's people like me out there, there's books out there, there's so much out there that really is teaching us about autoimmune disease. So we need to just open our eyes and have the conversation and look at root causes. But we've come a long way, but there's just about 200 different types of autoimmune diseases. I see some rare ones from time to time, but generally, the big ones are Hashimoto's, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis. I see some lupus. I'm starting to see a lot more Sjogren's. So it all is the same root, basically. It's inflammation is the driver, but roots can be pathogens or viruses or low vitamin D, hormone changes, those things that I talked about, leaky gut. Leaky gut's a big one. So if you even think that you may have an autoimmune disease or you already have one, just fix your gut, because that alone is going to help address the autoimmune disease.
That was a huge thing for me, because I didn't understand the leaky gut piece. I mean, all autoimmune disease has leaky gut. Is that right?
I wouldn't say all, but I would probably say probably close to that.
Yeah, definitely. Because for me, I was just kind of going for the thyroid, and it wasn't for me until I actually did some gut healing, like things like bone broth, glutamine, you know, all the things like even aloe vera, for example, like basically healing up that gut lining, and then going from there because that was really it. And because I've talked about leaky gut, we don't really need to go in that much, but there's so many different like causes and things to heal the gut because like all disease potentially begins in the gut. There's a lot of different things, but I feel like the majority of it probably does.
Yes.
Um, since we're on it, like, what would you say some things to actually heal up the gut? Because this is another thing I hear, like you can't actually heal leaky gut or it doesn't exist, and just it's nonsense. Like, do you see some key things that help repair the gut lining?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I see it all the time. So I did it for myself. I do lots of people. We reverse that leaky gut. But remember, we only have one layer of epithelial cells on the intestinal lining, so it's very fragile. On the outside, we have 7 layers, right, of our skin. So once we poke holes, right, bread, sugar, dairy, alcohol, and I say bread, I mean gluten, sugar, dairy, alcohol, prescription medications, all antibiotics, wipe that slate clean for your good gut bacteria. But if we don't have that good gut bacteria, it becomes very fragile and we start poking holes. Those toxins, the stress, pathogens, drugs, all these things can poke holes in the intestinal lining. And that's really, I think, the major root. That and inflammation are the two things I always talk about because that is where disease just starts. I completely agree with you on that. You mentioned all these really good amino acids and nutrients that help heal the gut. I have a product called Gut Reboot, which is exactly that: L-glutamine, slippery elm, marshmallow root, zinc carnosine, aloe. Really, really, really helpful. I always say this is like a hug for
Awesome.
your intestinal lining, right? So you're gonna start to heal that. Fiber in vegetables is also going to heal that leaky gut. And then, as you mentioned, bone broth, real good bone broth. That means when it's gelatinous at room temperature, you're having the same amino acids that we find in collagen that's creating collagen that you're going to help heal that gut. And I have a collagen shake at least once a day. I'm a big fan of collagen because of those properties. It's so healing to the gut. So I have chocolate and vanilla collagen that I produce, super picky about my products. And those are very, very helpful for a leaky gut. A gut reboot for sure is really, really helpful for healing a leaky gut.
Definitely. I mean, I make my own bone broth. I like get the bones from the farmer's market. I used to do like the stovetop version, but now I kind of do what do you call it? Yeah, Instapot. And that makes great broth as well. It's very simple, just kind of um I like to use bison bones sometimes, and it takes like 4 hours to cook,
Right?
and then it's a very collagenous. It's very good, and definitely like it helps with so many things like the joints and like system relaxation as well because of the amino acid glycine.
Uh-huh.
So just it's there's so many different benefits. A lot of research you talked about collagen and how that actually really helps the joints. Because like 50% of bone exact is actually collagen as well.
Right.
So it's very ancestrally healing, and we've used it for a long time. So I definitely recommend bone broth.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you use bone broth at all?
Yeah, all the time.
Awesome.
I drink bone broth and I use it for all my cooking. And as I said, I have a collagen shake pretty much every day. So I'm a
Yeah.
big fan of the amino acids for healing a leaky gut.
Yeah. Are you familiar with some of like the studies on the collagen or and how it benefits certain individuals?
I'm sorry, what kind of collagen?
Just collagen in general,
Oh,
because like you said, actually is different types of collagen, but
yeah. I mean, collagen, the benefits of that is for sure gut health, for sure. That helps with the intestinal lining, hair growth, cellulite, but connective tissue, so joint pain and immunity, muscle building. So collagen is just extremely beneficial. That's the only kind of protein I use in my shakes because everything else, I mean, it's absorbable. It's a great accessible, bioavailable protein.
yeah, from my understanding, type 1 and type 3, those are really good for the gut and the skin, while type 2 is really for the joints. Um, like the chicken broth is type 2. That's mainly that, while like the collagen type 1, type 3, it's like more of the cow and bovine sources. So that's kind
Uh-huh.
of interesting fact.
Yeah. Yeah, get as much types as you possibly can in collagen, but that's great. It's
Absolutely.
very knowledgeable. Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to add in terms of autoimmune diseases that people like, you think would need to hear that could benefit them in terms of that?
So the only thing I would really say is autoimmune diseases basically tend to collect. So people get, if you have one, you're likely to get two, three, four. I've
Yeah,
worked
that's
with
a good point.
this a long time, and I can tell you that once you get four, the people I've worked with are really not functioning. They have to take a leave of absence from their job. They can't really function. They can't really travel. They can't really, all the wheels have fallen off the bus. So I do recommend that if you do have an autoimmune disease or you have it in the family, just get checked and really take it seriously. Otherwise, it's just an expeditious cycle of disease.
That makes a lot of sense. So I've heard that before. I mean, because if we're not addressing the root cause, we're just pouring medication on top of it. Like it's kind of like we're kind of covering up the symptoms as we do, and those symptoms. It's not like the root cause is still there. Matter of fact, it's probably growing and it's not getting any better. So we have to really get to the root of the issue at some point, and so we can stop the disease cycle and starting into the virtuous circle of health and living on purpose.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I really enjoyed this interview. We talked about three key things. We talked about thyroid, menopause, and like what we can actually do to get well. Because I think that's really important for people to heal. Because a lot of people I know, like we don't understand that health is a possibility. Like we think we're kind of broken in a sense. And why wouldn't we? Like that's what that's what we say at the end. That's what we think. And basically, we're taught that through the pharmaceutical system, and we're just kind of in a sense on this perpetual circle, and health is always a possibility there.